I didn't know how to begin. Not because I lacked words, and not because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. The words were there. They always are. What I didn't have was a starting point that felt honest. Every beginning I considered felt slightly off, too sudden, too rehearsed, too aware of itself. I kept waiting for a moment. That would signal it was time to speak. A pause long enough, a question directed at me, a shift in the room that made space. But the moment never arrived. The room continued without hesitation. Conversation moved forward, carrying its own momentum. People spoke easily, their words connecting without effort. I listened, tracking the flow closely, noticing where I might enter. Each time the opening closed, before I could step into it. Not abruptly, naturally, and with every missed chance, the beginning felt further away. I told myself I was being patient. That waiting was thoughtful. That starting later might be better than starting poorly. But patience has a way of blending into avoidance, when nothing interrupts it. The longer I stayed quiet, the heavier the beginning became. It stopped feeling like a simple first sentence, and started feeling like a declaration, as if speaking now would require explaining why I hadn't spoken earlier. That wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to justify my voice before it had even entered the room, so I stayed where I was, present, listening, unstarted. From the outside, there was nothing unusual about my silence. I nodded at familiar points, smiled when the tone suggested it. I looked engaged, and in a way I was, but inside, everything remained unfinished. I noticed how the conversation adjusted around me. Not deliberately, not unkindly. It simply learned how to move forward, without expecting anything from me. The space didn't lean in my direction. It didn't leave gaps open. It found its rhythm and stayed with it. That was when I realized how fragile beginnings can be. They depend on timing, more than intention. The right words, arriving too late, lose their place. I thought about starting anyway, about stepping in mid-thought, accepting the awkwardness, letting the moment recalibrate. But even that felt like a beginning I didn't recognize. It felt forced, like interrupting something that had already decided its shape. So I waited, and waiting became familiar. The beginning stopped feeling possible, because the moment no longer expected it. I wasn't being excluded. I wasn't being ignored. I was simply no longer anticipated. That distinction mattered. It meant there was no resistance to push against, no tension to resolve, just a quiet absence of invitation. I realized then that beginnings don't always disappear loudly. Sometimes they fade, because nothing calls them forward. The room stayed full. Voices overlapped. Movement filled the space. Nothing suggested that something was missing, and yet my words remained unused. I wondered when the beginning had slipped away. There was no clear point to mark, no obvious mistake. It hadn't been lost through hesitation alone, but through repetition. Each time I chose not to start, the next beginning became heavier, more noticeable, more difficult to place, until the act of beginning itself felt out of proportion to what I wanted to say. The silence had grown around it, not aggressively, comfortably. At some point, I stopped thinking in terms of starting. I stopped preparing sentences. The beginning no longer felt delayed. It felt irrelevant. The moment had moved on, without needing it. That realization was quieter than I expected. There was no disappointment, no sudden regret, just a calm understanding that timing had passed, without making a sound. I don't know what would have happened if I had begun earlier. If I had spoken before the room found its balance, maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe everything would have. There's no way to know. Beginnings don't leave evidence behind. They either happen or they don't. And when they don't, the world doesn't pause to acknowledge it. It continues, adjusting effortlessly, learning how to move forward without what never entered. I didn't know how to begin, and by the time I understood what that meant, the moment no longer needed a beginning at all.